Hello, welcome back. It's time for another master game analysis. Today, again, we're going to be trying to predict the moves of international master John Bartholomew. In this game, he's playing as white, and the opponent is just someone from chess.com. They have a rating of 1,946. So we are going to be playing against a pretty strong opponent here. And we're going to see how an international master thinks in order to beat someone like this. So I've got no idea what move John Bartholomew starts with, so let's just see. E4, lovely. I like playing E4 myself. And against the Sicilian, my main move at the moment is this C3 move. Let's see what John Bartholomew does. There's obviously many options. Knight F3, perfectly fine. After d6 here, I would almost always play d4. In fact, I personally would always play d4. It's not necessarily the only option, but John Bartholomew plays it. After the capture, I would take with the knight, which John Bartholomew does. And after knight f6, attacking this pawn, I think I would play the standard move knight c3, which John Bartholomew does. After a6, here, I know this is all theory. I believe this is all theory, and I believe this is called the Najdorf. I actually don't know what the theoretical move here is, but I think a4 might be possibly a move you could think about playing. I think bishop e2 would be fine. Maybe bishop c4. Funnily enough, I don't really know what the move is. I think it may even be f3, in fact, from memory. f3 might be a move here. Anyway, I think there's lots of potential moves. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So let's see what John Bartholomew does. He actually plays bishop g5. I'm not going to really question this too deeply. I mean, I think it's still very much just the beginning of the game. This knight could move away if it wants. So I don't know, maybe this move is a little bit strange, but it does pose the question to black. Are you willing to let me take the knight and double your pawns? So, fair enough, it asks black a question. And black could answer this in many ways, so let's just see what they do. They actually defend the knight this way, so not willing to double the pawns, but this is the way they're going to choose to deal with that problem. Now I think, again, f3 would make sense. Moving the bishop somewhere would make sense. Moving the queen, I would not have done this, but I suppose getting ready to just quickly castle queenside does make lots of sense. Particularly because this king is currently very boxed in here in the center. The way that black played with knight d7, everything suddenly has become very connected and locked into place. So if we can quickly castle and open the center, things could be really nice. This bishop does look pretty unhappy though. So let's now cut and let's see what John Bartholomew said when he was coming up with this move, Queen e2. Did he mention this bishop here? Was he concerned about it? We might even go a little bit earlier and see if, what was he thinking when he played this move here? Because to me, moving this knight away or maybe playing a move like e5 would deal with those problems, more or less without too much issue. So let's now cut and see what John Bartholomew has to say about those things.
But here we have a mainline Najdorf. I'm going to play bishop g5. This is historically my favorite move in this position.
Okay.
There's a lot of theory here, no matter which move you choose. Even with wacky moves like knight b3 or h4 on the previous move. Okay, so black quickly plays knight bd7. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play queen e2. I've noticed in a lot of Najdorf games, this is a trendy motif where you actually block this bishop, but you accelerate castling queenside. So, I don't know any theory here. I've seen some games. I vaguely know the idea behind this, which is, keep the bishop back, accelerate that plan of castling, and throw the kingside pawns at black. Maybe trying to get e5 in, but I'm swimming on my own at this point.
All right, so we just heard it from the man himself that this move, Queen e2, in the Najdorf, which we identified this as being earlier, is a trendy move, blocking in the bishop indeed, but with the idea of castling it and throwing these pawns toward the opponent. So something we can maybe keep in the back pocket in case we find ourselves in any Najdorf situations. Unlikely if I typically play the c3 Sicilian, because it would just avoid all of this in the first place. But nevertheless, it's maybe an idea to keep in mind, and maybe one day I'll want to play this anyway. Or perhaps even I may end up on the black side of this particular arrangement. So it's nevertheless probably something decent to know. Well, let's move on. After the move e6, what would I play here? I'd be considering playing this move e5 to attack the knight, but because he has that square so well defended, it's not really going to make sense. I could consider maybe f4 to support that square, f4 threatening to play e5 on the next move, but if f4, he can play e5 himself. And even after we take, he can take back. We have to move this knight. I think if we're going to castle long, we might as well just castle long right now. So I think I would castle. That's what John Bartholomew has done. Now black, okay, they develop their queen, and that makes a lot of sense. It's what you would expect from a player of a good rating like 1946. He's getting out of this pin. So he's putting his queen on a semi-open file towards the king and freeing up the ability of this knight to move without losing his queen. So a nice multi-purpose move there, and the ball is back in our court as the white team. The question is, what do we want to do about it? Well, at this point, my bishop here, what's it really doing? I don't know. I guess John Bartholomew likes this move, as he said. I probably never would have played this way myself, but that's all right. We can consider lots of things. We can consider pushing some of these pawns. I think maybe even playing this move g3 would make sense to try and make way for the bishop to get to g2, and then supporting f4 in the future. Not that f4 really needs a lot of support, but we don't have to play that straight away. This is still a very flexible position, I think. So I'm just going to see what it is that John Bartholomew chooses. He does go with f4 straight away. Fair enough. I would imagine here black probably wants to castle, so I could imagine something like bishop e7 being played, which it is, and fair enough. Now, the question I suppose is, can we try and break through the center straight away with a move like e5 or f5? And as mentioned earlier, it's nice to have f4 in if we're going to play e5, so let's consider e5. e5 attacks the knight, so that's immediately nice. And if the knight moves, well, we can take the bishop. He probably takes back with the knight. And then we could take this pawn. He takes back somehow, and things are opening up for us there. So that's pretty nice. And it makes me think that if we play e5, he probably won't move the knight. He probably will take first. And then if we take back, he can actually take with his queen. And yeah, because he's got 1, 2, 3 different pieces all guarding this square, and one of them is a pawn. So after e5, he can take with the pawn once, and then his knight and queen will overwhelm our lone queen. So maybe not this, but what about f5? Well, if f5, he can push forward and attack our knight, and our knight then kind of has to retreat, and we haven't succeeded in opening the position. So personally, I think I would play something more along the lines of g4. But let's see what John Bartholomew does. He does play g4. Opening up, if you're going to go for this plan of pushing your pawns down, you might as well do it right now. If this guy's going to castle, there's a lot of pressure here. Not too afraid of this bishop being trapped, if he plays something like h6, because we can always trade it for the knight. If the knight moves, we can trade it for the bishop beyond it. So, okay, maybe we've played this move knowing that we don't care too much about this bishop, we're going to give it away. But we're making a lot of space to castle quickly and throw the pawns down the board, as he's mentioned earlier. So it makes a lot of sense. Black might be nervous now to castle on the king side, but let's see what they choose to do. They choose to play b5, delaying castling, looking to put the bishop on b7, and just produce a bit of a counter-attacking thrust themselves. Threatening b4, attacking the knight. Where would that knight then go? Doesn't look like there's a lot of convenient squares. So do we want to preemptively play something like a3? a3 to prevent b4. But if a3, maybe he can play a5, and he's going to be threatening this again. Even if we take, he takes back. So this knight may eventually have to move, and maybe we just better off allowing that and preparing for it, that if he plays b4, maybe we play knight a4. And from a4, where can we go? Well, there maybe not too many places. Maybe if b4, we just drop the knight back to b1, and in the future we seek to get back out via d2, and maybe b3 or c4. So maybe we're not too afraid of this b4 move. What else can we do in the meantime? We don't have any checks available. I think bishop g2 might make sense. He's going to play bishop b7 anyway. So having a bishop here to oppose him could be nice. Or do we just continue with our plan and play something like h5? That seems a bit slow, however, because it doesn't come with any kind of a threat at all. We could take this knight, and then regardless whether he takes with the bishop or the knight, we could then push the g pawn forward to g5. That way we're making progress, and rather quickly. So let's say he takes with the bishop and we play g5. He could trade the bishop for the knight here, we take back. I don't know. That doesn't seem incredible to me to do that. So we got to make a move. If he's bringing the bishop to this diagonal, maybe I prefer to put this rook on g1, where it's out of harm's way, and where in future it can still support this if it wants, but it also brings another defender to the g4 pawn. I think I would just play maybe rook g1. Let's see what John Bartholomew does. He plays bishop g2. Fair enough. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. It's a fair enough move. Bishop b7. Now I think, again, we have to come up with an idea. So what is the idea here, John Bartholomew? You're going to take this pawn twice with the tempo on the queen and also a tempo on this pawn here. Well, the queen, if it wants to defend, could come to this square or this square in order to defend. So plenty of options there for black. This whole part of the board would be opening up towards our king. Don't think we want to allow that. Therefore, I think that John Bartholomew would probably want to do something different. Now, I am starting to see the idea of after taking, and he takes back somehow, and playing g5, and he does something with this piece, maybe we could sacrifice for this pawn, he takes back, and then we have a check up here. But that is extremely bad. It's not bad to think about such things and to be ambitious and visualize a future, but even if we got to that future, g6 would be played, attacking our queen. So I don't think we really gain a lot there. Not to mention the fact that after takes, if he takes with the knight or the bishop, and we play g5, he can immediately take the knight. Therefore, we'll never have a chance to play this speculative move anyway. But what I'm really trying to get at here and what I'm noticing is that there could be a potential weakness here. This pawn on e6 could potentially be weak if this diagonal was open and if this pawn was either pinned or not present. So it's just something to be aware of, that seems like there might be a slight pressure point here. Now, what about a move like e5? e5 attacks the knight. It also attacks the bishop. The bishop's defended, and our bishop is also defended. But let's just try and calculate. If we play e5 and he takes the bishop, we take back. Or would we take the knight and allow him to capture the rook because we then want to take the bishop here? I mean, that could be a nice move, e5. Not to mention the fact that we're opening things up at a period of time where we're castled and he's not. So I actually think e5 here could make a lot of sense. Like I say, otherwise I'm thinking of taking here and then playing g5. But let's see what John Bartholomew does, because I don't really know how I'm supposed to evaluate these different options. And so it might be nice now to cut to John Bartholomew and see how he actually decides on the move that he chooses. And let's first see what he does choose. He chooses to take, and black actually takes with the pawn, which was unexpected. But yeah, let's cut to John Bartholomew and see how did he decide to take this knight. Was there some kind of genius logic to it? Let's find out.
Now, if I want to force things, knight d5 is a pretty interesting move here.
Wow.
It really is. Pawn takes, going for that pin on the bishop. In this exact position, I don't know if it's sound, but definitely a move to consider. I could also play rook he1, maybe b4, then knight d5.
Interesting.
a3 is another move.
As we mentioned.
Okay, I'm looking again at this. Knight takes g5.
Yep.
Knight d7, maybe just h4.
Okay, just making progress.
The attack going at that point. Yeah, let's go with that.
All right.
I don't want this to get to like a 2-minute time advantage for black while I'm babbling here.
Yeah. All right. So we've just seen it from the man himself. He didn't actually consider the move e5. Now, that's not necessarily to say that the move is bad, and I'd be very curious just to chuck the engine on here. The engine, you saw a little arrow pop up there, that e5 here is actually a perfectly reasonable move. So it's not like I'm suggesting something crap, which is also reassuring. All right, so regardless, we're trying to not get into the mind of the computer. We're just trying to get into the mind of the master. So if you were in this position, which is what we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of someone playing this position, what would we want to do here? In general, I'm pretty happy with the scenario. We're castled, he's not castled. He can castle either way, but both sort of ways have their downside, and I'm sort of starting to think he's just going to keep his king in the center and claim that these pawns are a nice barricade for him. Because over here, there's a semi-open file. Over here, there's a semi-open file. And so I don't think he wants to commit his king to either of those semi-open files. In the meantime, his bishop is relatively passive, although easy for it to open up. Some scope. And what we just learned is that I thought that this was a tender square, tactically speaking, and perhaps it could well be one day. But he's raising the possibility that actually there might be tactical ideas associated with knight d5, which looks like a crazy move. I think this is actually a very common move in the Najdorf Sicilian, so something to be really aware of. But as I don't really often play the Najdorf, it's, in the back of my mind, now that I've heard it, it's triggered memories that this is a thing. But to be aware that in this kind of Najdorf Sicilian, knight d5 is often a very surprising tactical idea. And his idea was, if pawn takes knight, we take back, and all of a sudden, this file towards his king is opened. And he suggested the idea of rook h to e1 to prepare that eventuality even more. And I like that. I think that's what I'd play here now. I think I would play rook h e1. Let's see what he does play. He actually just jumps right in. He jumps right in with knight d5. So what's the idea? After pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn, yes, we're attacking the bishop, but the bishop is defended by the king. Maybe what he's saying is, therefore, you cannot castle. But I don't think that's true. You can castle and just give the bishop up. Keep in mind, black's already won a knight. So we take a knight, he takes back. Even if he castles and we take the bishop, I mean, is that so bad for black? Is that really so bad for black? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. Let's cut back to John Bartholomew and see what he was thinking when he came up with this idea.
Right. Okay, so takes here. Yeah, this is an audacious decision. I wasn't expecting that. Still possible black will castle this way, but I kind of think they're going to go long. And I'm really looking at this move even more so now. Even more than I was previously. Could get spicy. E takes d5, then maybe knight f5 is even a move.
But then what if d4?
A definite theme. Okay, if I play knight d5, pawn takes, how do I feel about that as well? Black can castle, I take e7, and then unfortunately black has rook e8.
That's right.
And my queen gets trapped.
That's right.
Unless I'm missing something there. So I think if I were to play this, it would be with this idea.
Right.
I'm not quite sure I buy it. Maybe d4 in reply at that point.
d4, yeah, that's right.
Looks very interesting, though. I'm tempted to do it. Likewise, I can consider this jump. Just reverse the order, or even take with one of these pawns. Could play rook he1 and just try to strengthen that whole thing, try to get black to make a decision about which way to castle. F5 is another idea, trying to lean on this pawn.
Lots of possibilities.
I think black would reply with E5. So I'm not sure I want to close it yet.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't seem like he's
really looking at this.
calculated it.
This whole operation.
Okay, he's
I'm going to go for it. This is going to get interesting, guys. I know you want to
Instinct.
see me play this move, and I kind of want to see myself play it.
Sort of seems like he's made that move on instinct, if you ask me. And I would wonder what the computer says about this. So if we chuck the engine on, at the moment, it's giving an evaluation of somewhere between plus 0.7 and plus 0.8, kind of an advantage to white. After the move knight d5, white still has an advantage, but it's a little bit less. The advantage now is considered to be about plus 0.3, approximately 0.4. So it's certainly not a bad move. It's not a winning move. It's not a losing move. It's just a perfectly fine move. Surprisingly, considering that, it just apparently just gives up a knight. So what does black do here? Well, black took with the bishop. That seems probably like it's the worst move you could make. Because now we take back anyway, and I suppose black's going to play e5 to try and keep the center closed. Well, we can try and, continue on here. But this square here looks amazing for the knight. So we could take once, just to open up the F file a little bit more. We can take once. He probably could take back with the knight then, however. But then we can get our knight over to this nice square. Which, at the very least, it attacks the bishop. But the other thing is, if we take and he takes with the knight, we can drop our knight. Or even advance our knight up here to sort of counterattack his knight and threaten to capture. What do we do here, though? I'm not sure. Do we take once? If we take once and allow possibly knight to capture, or possibly he takes with one of the pawns, or do we move our knight, or do we just ignore and bring a rook to the e file and say, if you take the knight, we're going to checkmate you? Maybe that's the nicest idea here, is just to bring a rook over to the h file. The h rook to the e file. Let's see what John Bartholomew did. He actually just advances the knight right up into black's grill. He says, I don't know if you were thinking about castling long, but now you no longer can, because you can't castle across a check. So this has probably turned out in white's favor. I would imagine the evaluation is now very much in white's favor. And the computer agrees it's about plus 3.4 now. So black didn't respond very well there. They probably got spooked by the fact that an international master was doing something a bit interesting, and they just probably got spooked that this is not good. And so instead of trusting their instinct and taking with the pawn, they took with the bishop. Regardless, here we are. It's certainly not easy still. Black decides to try and eliminate this knight. And of course, the temptation here, I think, would be to take the bishop. Take the bishop off the board and try and play on from there. Although, just leaving the knight where it is and say, if you take, I take back with the pawn. This pawn is well protected by my bishop over here. And it's going to be annoying for you to deal with this pawn in the future. So I'm just going to leave that there and bring my rook across to the e file. That's something I really want to do. Or maybe now I want to take this pawn and open up the f file a little more. One of those moves I think is good. John Bartholomew decides on the pawn captures pawn move. And after takes back, now this f file's open. Maybe we want to put a rook there. That I think would make plenty of sense. Maybe we even want to play h4 and go for g5. I think putting a rook there makes some sense too. What is this all about? John Bartholomew says, no. I'm just going to take this pawn off the board. What is this move? I mean, can black not just recapture? I mean, they choose not to. But can't black just take this? Let's create the variation. What do we do here as white? Ooh, now I see it. That is really nice, because now we have this little fork hitting the queen and the bishop. And of course, you would think, well, black can just take, but in so doing, black loses this rook up in the corner. So that is a really nice idea there by John Bartholomew. He has done something that I didn't do. When I'm looking at h4, not following my own advice, not following the advice of Irving Chernev and Fred Reinfeld in the book that I created an entire YouTube series out of. You're supposed to start with looking at the forcing moves. Look at the checks. Well, there are none here. Look at the captures. Well, I considered taking the bishop for a moment. Didn't even think about taking the knight. Certainly didn't think about taking the pawn. But you got to consider these things. Consider taking the pawn. Well, he takes back. Oh, hey. Well, then there's this fork that we could do. And that would be really nice. So that's what JB's done here. Let's see if he how he came to it quickly. And then we'll come back, and this game looks like it's getting towards the end.
That's definitely a thing. Okay, but black's scared. They take with the bishop, and I don't think this is a good move. I think you have to take with the pawn there.
Definitely.
Let's take back with my pawn. Maybe this is due to the rating. I do wonder when I see a decision like that, would black have played the same move against someone their rating or lower? So maybe black's giving me some credit.
I think so.
For that sacrifice, but I think pawn takes was really the only move there. Not that this is immediately winning, but this is quite comfortable for me now because my knight is going to get in somewhere juicy, like f5 or c6. Black can't allow this center to open up, so I think it's a virtual guarantee black's going to play e5 here to try to close it. And I can still play knight f5 at that point if I want.
So I think in broad strokes, I've been understanding, the broad strokes of the game. But, certainly there's some things I've been missing so far, but I still want to hear his thoughts on how he came up with that idea of knight takes e5.
Knight c6, also tempting. I'm going to consider that too.
Might have to fast forward a little bit. Yeah, he was thinking about things all through here, these tactical ideas.
Pressure on the bishop. And I foresee black's king just being weak on the king side in general. So, yeah, that's tough, though. I would have liked to, if I had more time, spend it on knight e6, knight f5, rook e1, various moves like that. But all in all, 15 moves into this game, I'm feeling very good about this position. Yeah, and black does play knight b8. Okay, so one thing I was considering here was taking on e5. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to take right away. I'm not even going to delay this move. Let's let black ruminate over which way to recapture. Because if you take with the d-pawn, d6 is unpleasant. Or maybe even easier, take on e7 and then d6. Open this bishop towards the rook. If black takes on c6 in-between move, I have in-between moves of my own. So that really only leaves f takes e5, which black plays. And now I can go rook f1 or maybe knight takes e5. I'm trying to think if that move works. Knight takes e5, and then d6 would be the idea, looking for this opening. I feel like Mikhail Tal would play this move instantly. So I don't see anything wrong with it. There is this check. Check and queen e7, though. Maybe Mikhail Tal would have saw that too. Knight takes e5, bishop g5, king b1, queen e7, and I'm in a pin. I could go rook e1 there. Oh, that's probably still good for me, actually. Yeah, I think that's still good for me. Let's do it.
Oh, wow. Many thoughts about that section there. Many thoughts indeed. I mean, the primary thought that I have is that, as you see, this international master, what he was doing that I just have simply not been doing, he was considering all these different tactical ideas. And that's the first difference between where I'm at and where he's at in terms of chess skill and ability. He's considering these tactical ideas concretely. If this, then that, then this, then that. Simple. And he's considering a few of them. And he's not just dismissing ideas because on the surface they may not immediately look good. Oh no, I can't do that because potentially gives up a knight. No, you have to consider it if it's one of the forceful moves. And he's going through And of course, he's got a lot of intuition that's built up over the years as well that helps him to calculate through these things really quickly. But you can literally see him and hear him explaining that he is, nevertheless, considering these various options. So that is one thing that I need to do more of. The other thing is he's also going a little bit deeper, just a step or two deeper. Even after considering this idea of jumping back and taking the knight, he was thinking, hey, what if they respond with this check, and when I move the king, they bring the knight, the queen in. So he wasn't just seeing, oh, I can take, and then there's a fork here, cool, end of story. No, he was saying, well, yeah, that would be nice, but also it's not the only possible story. He doesn't have to take here. He could give a check, make me move out of the way, and then bring the queen over here, and all of a sudden this knight could be taken in an unfavorable fashion. There's no fork here anymore for me to rely on. And he had calculated there that the rook would come over and that everything would be okay somehow in the end. But the point is, not only was he calculating more different options, he was calculating them just a step or two further and being careful about them. So that was another primary difference. The third thing that I'll probably end this video on now, because we've learned a few things from it already, and at this point white has a very big advantage, is he mentioned Mikhail Tal. Now Mikhail Tal is one of my favorite players. I don't have it handy right here, but I do have a beautiful artwork made by a mate of mine, Dave Noble, who he sketched out a portrait of Mikhail Tal for me, and I have it framed in the room here. But the next master analysis video will be a game of Mikhail Tal. And instead of, going through and comparing my thoughts to John Bartholomew's thoughts, I'll compare my thoughts to the notes, the annotations that Tal wrote about the game. So he was at one stage a world champion, had an amazingly interesting style of chess. And so we look forward to that. Let's quickly play this game out and then we'll see what happens. So maybe a couple more moves here. Now I suppose we can probably just save the knight somehow. Bringing it back to this square makes a lot of sense. Basically forcing a trade. And from here, life should be pretty easy for white. We can probably bring a rook to one of those files and just put a lot of pressure on black. Black is collapsing. So let's just go through now at fast pace. There's a check, we move out the way. King's trying to get to a safer square. But we're putting a lot of pressure on this pawn right now. So black has to respond by caring for that pawn. But we can put more pressure on the position by attacking the bishop, and we're just accumulating pressure towards this king. If we want, we can trade queens. But if we want to put even more pressure on the position instead, we can do that too. Check. Wow, that's a master level move. Just to finish things off. Check, taking the queen away. And then we get to take the rook out in the corner. That'll do us. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Don't forget, in the next master analysis video, which will probably be after a couple more, training game and tactics session videos, we're going to look at a Mikhail Tal video. So leave a comment if you like Tal. Leave a comment if you've been watching this at all, and we'll catch you soon. Cheers.